1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts of books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Welcome back to The Author Has Thoughts. This week I'm continuing my series on my fourth cyberpunk novel in the Bridge Chronicles series, The Long and the Short Swords. Streets were packed with all manner of people. Since its inception, the Los Angeles Autonomous Zone, known colloquially as the Gangland, had been an immensely popular destination for all manner of guests. The absence of any corporate, civil, or federal laws meant that any sort of trade could be had in the zone, the kind of place where all manner of ugly desires could be satisfied with no legal consequences. Of course, that sort of dangerous atmosphere meant that the risks were great, and not everyone who entered the zone returned intact. Every external entrant was tracked to ensure that those who disappeared in the gangland could at least be mourned by those outside. Since not everyone wanted to have their names associated with the trip into that kind of place, Bridge had been doing a brisk trade in fake IDs for the express purpose of an anonymous jaunt into and out of the zone. Anyone could visit, except during the taping of the Gangland show starting late afternoon on Saturday night and ending Sunday morning shortly after sunrise. During that time, the checkpoints would turn away anyone trying to enter or leave. Bridge remembered how 3rd Street had looked before the zone. It had been empty enough, a bit run down, but otherwise a normal, everyday Los Angeles street with sporadic pedestrians. There was the 5-story apartment complex that took the whole block from Hewitt to Rose and up to 2nd Street. Sure, it had been dilapidated before, a result of the slumlord policies of one Marty Beeson, who'd hired Bridge to find an outside tenant attitude readjustment consultant. Those tenants now lived with the Family Citizens Brigade on the north side of Gangland. The building now had multiple scorched holes in the walls where munitions had deposited their dirty payloads, and Bridge couldn't see one unbroken shard of glass in the place. Every building along 3rd Street showed the same signs of combat, bullet holes along every wall in random patterns. Bridge stepped forward on the sidewalk and shell casing tinkled off his shoes. Hawkers of every variety shouted sales pitches for their wares from their makeshift booths placed at random intervals. One vendor sold what appeared to be bootleg software from a ramshackle tent parked in the middle of the street. The smart vendors used as little construction as possible in their setups, knowing that each week they'd have to cart it all to somewhere safe before the bullets started flying and the explosions began. Another vendor across the street shouted something Bridge couldn't hear over the murmur of the crowd, holding up what looked to be a human arm jarred in a viscous solution over his head, probably selling some banned tissue cloning techniques that didn't actually work. Bridge knew the scam well. Take a tissue sample, claim to vat grow the new limb, attach a stolen limb from some organ shop in Tijuana, and hook the rube on anti-rejection drugs. Bridge always got a laugh at the gullibility of some people when he saw a white guy with the arm of a Mexican festering on his shoulder. What is this place? The Gangland. Seeing the confusion spread across Logan's face, Bridge elaborated. Don't tell me you don't know about the Gangland. When was the last time you were in Los Angeles? I watched the goddamn news. 2027? I've been out of the country. Off the fucking planet, more like. Gangland is the biggest reality TV show in history, the subject of constant controversy and punditry. We get more downloads than porn these days. You really don't watch TV? I've been on the run for almost a year. When do I get a chance to sit in place for more than one day? Television is not how I choose to spend my time. I wanted to explore the Gangland a little more. You know, I had set up the concept in If Tribe, and I had, in the original trilogy that I had written, or the original novel I had written, I had some exploration of it when some of the characters had to enter the zone, but I didn't really have anything that was concrete. This is what it looks like. This is what's going on. So I decided that part of the way that I would get Logan's story set up is by using the Gangland as a place to hide him while Bridge tries to get him a new identity. Because basically the whole thing is Logan's on the run from the clan, the Purist clan, and he needs to change his identity yet again. He happens to be in Los Angeles now, and move on, or at least hide a little better because his last identity is burned. And he hires Bridge to do it after talking to a number of people in Los Angeles. And once Bridge realizes, okay, they go to see a paper guy, and the paper guy has already been killed by some of the purists. He's like, well, the only way I'm going to be able to hide this guy, since none of my paper guys are going to talk to me, none of my identity guys are going to talk to me, I need to hide this guy for a little bit while I work some magic. And the best place to do that is the gangland. Everybody gets tracked coming into the gangland, but once you're there, nobody knows where you are. You can disappear. And Bridge, of course, one of the things he's done since the gangland started, one of the ways he's made money that is not tied to the show is by selling fake IDs that people can use to get into and out of the zone without their real IDs being tracked, or being associated with having gone into that den of thieves and villainy. Bridge uses one of his many sewer entrances that he's hidden from the regular CLED authorities and the Chronosoft administration to bring Logan into the gangland so that he can hide him while he gets a new identity made and tries to figure out how he can get Logan away from the heat that's on him. By bringing him into the gangland, not only did I have a good excuse for how he could, get away from his pursuers, but also an excuse to explore the gangland and move some of the plot forward with something that Bridge runs into once he starts talking to some of the gangs that are running, some of the families that are running the gangland, including the Black Panthers, the Los Magos. While Bridge is talking to Aristotle and the Black Panthers in their control booth, because the Black Panthers have been set up as the family that, since they're peaceful, they're not going to do gangster shit. They're going to film the gangland. They're going to control the cameras and things on the gangland side of the production, while there's a Chronosoft team outside that takes that feed and does things with it as well. Thus, Bridge goes to see Aristotle and the Panthers, and while he's there, he sees a guy tagging a wall with this weird symbol. It's R with a little circle and a strike through it, as in you're striking through. And I took the name of this from a Sepultura song called "Refuse Resist." I really like that song. It's one of their earlier works. And Bridge finds out that there's this group of just regular jagoffs who are coming into the zone and are tagging RR over other gang tags. And of course, the 5 families, use the tags, the graffiti, as markers for territory. So clearly, if you're walking in and you're tagging over that, you're basically pissing on their authority. The Bridge finds out that these guys have been popping up every now and then, but it's not like they're not like attacking people. They're being more of a nuisance than anything. They're kind of messing with some stuff, but they're not really not killing anybody, like that. And so he recognizes that the autonomous zone being lawless per se, that the families have to be the law, at least for their territory. And so anything that potentially undercuts that authority, like say, tagging over their tags, is going to cause issues. Because, again, there are no laws, there's no police, so any authority for doing things has to come from the community. Now, as an aside, the previous series of videos that I taped last week, but I have no idea when I'm actually going to show them, but they should show before this. One of the things that happened shortly after I taped that was the autonomous zone in Seattle. Apparently, and I haven't followed up too much on this, but there are apparently a group of people who are setting up kind of an Occupy-esque couple of block zones in the middle of Seattle as an autonomous zone. I think that originally was the name of it, that something CH autonomous zone, something like that. So it's kind of weird as hell to see, even though they're two vastly different things, but to see that kind of thing that I'm writing about, this autonomous zone that has its own police, it has its own rules, but is not part of the structure of the city that it's in. It's basically made its own rules because the police have retreated from it and left it to its own devices when they're not firing fucking tear gas at protesters who are doing nothing. But it's just a weird. It's a very weird thing, and I'm going to link to something down in the description below, written by Mike Pondsmith. Now, if you don't know, Mike Pondsmith is a long time. He's a few years older than me, I believe. Role-playing game writer, creator, game designer, he's come up with a number of games that I haven't played, but the one of his that I have played, Cyberpunk 2020. I ran that for a good 4 or 5 years in the late 90s, early 2000s, something like that, with some buddies of mine. And I've always loved the Cyberpunk, clearly I've always loved the Cyberpunk rules and the world that he built. And I take a lot of inspiration. You can see a lot of the ideas that I got. I either got while running that, or got by looking at it, like, hey, that's a good idea. Cyberpunk, we'll use that. As a matter of fact, I think the concept behind the creches is close to what he used in Cyberpunk and Cyberpunk 2020. And he recently, but I don't know when you've seen this, so it's probably going to be at least a month after that got released before you see this. He did a blog post about the whole movement, and he talked about Cyberpunk 2020. And he said, I wrote Cyberpunk 2020 not as an inspiration, but as a warning of what happens when you have police that serve themselves and other wealthy interests, and you have too much power concentrated in corporations' hands, and so on and so forth. And I'm the same way about my stuff. I mean, the gangland sounds kind of cool, but it is a warning of what happens when a community power structure ignores or just washes its hands of any responsibility for the protection and service of its constituency. And that's what the gangland came out of. I mean, the gangland came out of the mayor trying to ethnically cleanse what he thought were undesirables. Not just racially undesirables, but economic undesirables. And while in America, I don't think you can, and I'm going to get on the soapbox here. In America, I don't think you can decouple the racial discrimination from the systemic policies of decay that are caused by many of our cities and states around the country. I don't think you can decouple that. I think there's so much systemic racism that's just ingrained in our bones and in the power structures we built. But I also don't think we can underemphasize, or I don't think we can overemphasize the methods by which that systemic racism is enacted. In many cases, those are economic. Those are keeping the boot on people of color through economic conditions. And, I think in times now where we're seeing African-American unemployment rate of over 50%, of African-American adults being unemployed, those economic issues are very real. Now, I think and again, to get on my soapbox, I think one of the issues that Bernie Sanders' campaign and his, very leftist socialist democratic campaign failed on, and one of the reasons he did not attract more minority voters was his laser focus on solely the economic aspect of it. Coming from a very privileged position of, white privileged position, where he thinks, if we just solve the economic issues, all the other issues go away. Well, that's not the case. That is absolutely not true. They will help. having a better, better healthcare system, better social safety net, will help better health outcomes, better employment. It improves the economy by not having a bunch of people unemployed without money and starving in the streets. If you fix those economic issues, it can help with some of the issues facing the communities of color in this country. But it's not going to be a panacea because, as we've seen with this George Floyd killing and the protests around the country, the problem isn't just economic. The economics are there, but, a black man with money is no less susceptible to being shot by police for no reason than one without money. We've seen that over and over again. We've seen, middle-class, working African-American men and women being shot and killed or killed in some way by police probably because they're black. I've digressed a little bit, but the autonomous zone, seeing the autonomous zone in Seattle and seeing all the attacks against peaceful protesters by the police over the past few weeks, I know I did a whole series about this previously, but I'm going to go into it a little more here. It's both surreal and disappointing in that the things I write about that could take place just 10 years from now are kind of happening now. Riots in the streets and hard crackdowns and that sort of thing. And while I was wrong in that it appeared I was wrong in the gangland was built around very racially segregated gangs. I'm actually seeing, gangs get together in certain areas to protect themselves from the police. So the riots of 2027 that basically led to the five families being created were about these very ethnically segregated communities protecting their own from the police and, the police who were overreacting to the riots and who also started the riots because of the Jackson 5 incident. Again, I don't want the future to look like my books. I don't want the future to look like now. I think we can do better across the board with regards to policing, with regards to economic outcomes for people, with regards to how we handle health care and unemployment and other social safety net issues that we've let lay fallow, and that a certain segment of the political structure, i.e. the Republicans and the conservative movement and the libertarians, have decided to absolutely destroy at every level. I think we can do better. Testing, doing all the tests for my sound levels.